Thank you. All right, I'm going to start again. It's 2:03, and I'm calling the meeting to order, and we are recording. So we're going through the welcome everybody. I'm Nancy Vandell, Bylaws Committee Chairperson, and I'm thrilled that we have such a great group here today. I just would like to go through the agenda very quickly. We're going to talk briefly about the process, and then including our discussion for today. And then we'll turn it over to our subcommittee members who worked so hard on this Article 3, and they will go through the recommendations. So, and then we'll have some closing remarks and get your input on how this meeting went. So this meeting is likely to take at least 2 hours, and if you're willing, we may go actually over a little bit further. So I'm going to share the screen and get to a little presentation here. We're not going to take much time on this. Can you all see the presentation? Okay, and everybody can hear me okay, right? Bill, can you hear me now? Okay. All right, I want to introduce our subcommittee. Michael Beachley, our scribe. And Michael, are you here to wave or say something? I think, well, maybe he's not here. There you are.
Yeah. Thank you, Nancy. Appreciate the introduction. Appreciate all you do. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to see a bunch of people here today. It's really nice.
Great. Thank you, Michael. And you're going to take care of the just the nuggets of comments, correct, as we go through. Tom Sipe, our editor, and one of the key authors of today's presentation. Wad Angelo, who is the other key author of our presentation today. Bill Miller and Susan Schoenberg. And hi, Bill. And Susan is going to be handling the order of people commenting when we get to that. And I'll talk a little bit about that further. And then we're thrilled to have Sarah Absher, the Director of Tillamook County Community Development, with us today. And Sarah is going to be attending all of our feedback sessions. And she has been a tremendous asset in supporting us today. We also have Mark Everett, who's the chairperson for the NCAC here today. Would you like to say hi, Mark?
Yeah, sure. Hello. Good morning. Okay. Good afternoon, I guess. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just briefly going through. We have a lot of people here today that haven't been really involved with any of our meetings or presentations so far. And we've had some questions on why are we here? What are we doing here? So I just want to go through the goals that the committee has been charged with. Our job has been to review, reformat, and update the bylaws. They were formulated around 2006, and they were updated in 2018. And my understanding is that that was a fairly simple update. And so we are undergoing quite an extensive update of the bylaws. And we're reviewing, looking for clarity, because the current ones have some areas where they're not clear, and in fact, they can conflict with other areas of the bylaws. We want them to be functional, usable for everybody, officers and members, and we want them to be fair. And so that's one of the things we're certainly going to be talking about today as we go through the member section of the bylaws. We also are working very hard to be transparent to all of you. We are following Oregon public meeting law and learning a lot about that as we go along. Some parts of it we think are great, other parts are a little bit hindering of productivity, but overall we're making that work, and we're certainly very much liking being transparent and making sure you have all of the information about our meetings, notices, our documents, and can get to them. So we've formulated a bylaws review process. We've done a bunch of things already before we got into the substantive area that I'm not going to go through today, but you can access this presentation on the website, and there's slides at the back that talk about some of the things we've done before. But as we got into the substantive changes, we've assigned each article review to 1 or 2 subcommittee members, because under Oregon Public Meeting Law, we're allowed to meet one-on-one and come up with a draft proposal that then is brought to the full subcommittee for our meetings. And so in our meetings, then we update, we gather input, and we revise as appropriate. Article 3, we have brought into at least 7 or 8 meetings and had extensive discussions in between meetings as well, one-on-one with among ourselves as well as among members who have come to us. We then vote on initial subcommittee recommendations to bring to the feedback sessions that we're holding, that you're here attending today. Hopefully all of you have seen the schedule. We have 9 feedback sessions that are scheduled to go over the different bylaws articles. And then as we hold the feedback session like today's, we will then take back suggestions and comments that you all have it back into our committee and make adjustments as necessary. We also concurrently are reviewing with Tillamook County. Sarah Absher is our contact, and she is reviewing with the County Council and the Board of County Commissioners as we go along. Tillamook County has to actually approve our bylaws changes. They have set up the NCAC, and they're responsible for this NCAC. So it's been a great help to have Sarah so involved with us in our meetings and at the feedback sessions. Finally, once we have that approval, we will take a vote on the bylaws at a general meeting. And we're thinking it's going to be a special meeting in May to go over the bylaws. Those are, at that meeting, you can also have input, and it will be a more formal process than in the feedback session today, in which we'll have actual parliamentary procedures training so that you can appropriately make your comments and suggest changes even at that point. So there are lots of ways to provide input to us. You can email me at ncacbylaws@gmail.com, and I'll get it to the committee. You can email the info@ncac.com, at gmail.com, for forwarding to our committee. And you may notice subcommittee, committee. Currently, we're a committee, but we're suggesting we be changed to subcommittees. That'll be in Article 7 later. You can attend our bylaws subcommittee meetings, which are the first and third Fridays of each month. We have 2 a month. And of course, the feedback sessions. We want to hear your feedback. We want to hear your comments and your input. It's been very valuable up to this point, and we're really excited about these feedback sessions. So today we're going to be presenting Article 3 by section. There are 4 sections, and Tom is going to present the first 2, and Wyatt's going to present the last 2. And as we discuss each section, please note in the chat, you can do 2 different things. You can note that you wish to speak. Just say, I want to speak in the chat. Or you can actually put a comment that you would like read from the chat. And Susan will be monitoring the chat. She has a big job here, and will be putting people in order of, as you have said you've wanted to speak. We're going to ask that you please limit your comments to 2 minutes if you possibly can. Because we want to hear it, but we want to hear everybody's comments, and this will help us get so think about how you're going to present everything. As a commentator, you can speak again if you're responding to someone else's comment, but if you really don't have anything new to add, we would like to be able to move along and get through everything. Speak to the issue or raise a question as you wish. The committee members today are here to listen. We're here to listen and answer questions, but we're here to really hear you. So we will not necessarily be discussing, other than Tom and Wyatt and probably me. At the end of each section, we'll take an informal poll. It's just to get an idea if we're totally off base, or, are there a lot of opinions either way? We're going to be offering multiple options rather than just one option. So we're going to want to hear what you're coming down on. But this is not going to be anything like a vote or anything like that on the bylaws. At the end, we'll discuss the article as a whole. You'll have a chance to have some more input on the articles. And then we would appreciate your suggestions at the end on how you thought the session went. So we'll have some questions about that. Keep in mind that all of our meetings do fall under Oregon Public Meeting Law. So all meeting video and chat is public. We're we've had a lot of interest in this article, more than anything else, and comments already. And some of the comments have been occasionally, well, quite strong. And so we just want to say, we know that we all care about Neskowin. We all love Neskowin. It's a very, very special place, and we all have a lot in common. So we're hoping that through this process of talking about bylaws, we're going to all come together through discussion. And the feedback sessions are all about your opinions and your questions. We're going to ask you to please keep comments as suggestions, avoid attacking other people's views, and all questions and opinions are valid. So, another clarification, since membership implies voting, that the county, Sarah will tell you that minority opinions are very important to the county as well as majority opinions, that the whys are more important than the how many's. And so, we want to be able to have a fair way of saying who a member is, but the numbers are not critical. Now, I will say for elections of officers and committee members and that kind of thing, of course, numbers do matter. So that's all I have. Does anyone have any questions before we get to the actual article? Are you seeing anything in the chats? Do we have any phone members? If anyone is a phone member, please let us know, because when we're showing videos, we can't always see people. Okay.
Nancy,
Tom?
before we start, do we have an idea of how many people are in attendance?
It looks like we have 32 right now. So you can go into a view to see everybody. You can go into a gallery view, and then you won't just be looking at the speaker. And we have quite a nice turnout. So some of the people that are here as members have come to our meetings, have spoken before to us, and a lot of you we haven't seen before, so it's a great mix. So Tom, do you want to take it away?
Yes, I will. Thank you very much. Let's see if I'm still on mute. No, I'm not. Oh, very good. That's about one in a row for me. Okay, so let me set that up. Okay, welcome. And thank you, Nancy. Appreciate that. This is about Article 3, as you heard. The purpose of this is basically to do a topic by topic review, comments, and alternative text discussion. We're going to try to figure out where people are at. We spent a lot of time on Article 3 in our subcommittee meetings, and we sort of came to the mutual conclusion that we didn't know enough about what other people thought, and we're uncomfortable with making recommendations without getting some input first. So that's why this particular presentation will probably be different than all the others. We suspect that there won't be alternatives offered in the others, but this one definitely does. And we'll use the poll to help guide us to alter our presentation. We have on the books another member Article 3 review, and hopefully at that one we will have something which we propose as the final, but this is by no means final. We really have 4 topics. I'll cover the first 2. Wyatt will cover the second 2. Where qualifying property must be. In other words, if you're a member, you have to have some interest in a, and we'll define that in a minute, within Neskowin. And who could be a member. And there are 2 options on the table for both of those. We have less controversy and we have more certainty over the member rights of access and member establishment. Although we never know, there may be controversy there too. Okay, and we have supplied some arguments that we've heard just to give feedback that we are hearing things that people have strong feelings one way or another, and we wanted to acknowledge that, but it's probably not all of the opinions out there. Basically, the background on the boundary issue, which is where is the Neskowin community? What physical area does it correspond to? The current bylaws, with conversations with Bill Bush, basically they were written vague. They were written to be vague. Many people we listened to were uncomfortable with vague, and they wanted it to be more precise. Several people had the opinion that they should be very well defined. If that's true, then my logic and Wyatt's logic was that government entities provide good definitions because they have an advantage, and so of having a map available. But the factors that includes where to draw the lines is, what areas have some commonality. Does Nesquin within that community boundary impact that area? And does the Nesquin impact, does the area impact Nesquin? In other words, is there interaction? Is there commonality? And that's the criteria, kind of the overall view. So this one is a complicated slide because I didn't want to change the number of slides because some people had referred to slides by number in correspondence. This is a very crowded slide, but basically there's two parts to it. One is the alternates that we've considered and declined, and an introduction to those two, specifically some more detail on two of them. And then we have the two proposal options. And let me just go through that. I'm going to talk fairly rapidly, I hope. So if you have questions later, we can certainly do that. There will be between each section, there'll be an opportunity for discussion, and very happy to answer questions if I'm not clear on something. But the four of the alternatives that we did many of them is using the community boundary. We got feedback from the county that probably wasn't what we needed to do. That'd be the very small area, and I'll point it out in a subsequent map. Zip code was brought forth as a feasibility, and anybody who had the 149 zip code should be in Nesquin. That didn't work because there's not really a map, and the post office is not. It may change. Zip codes are assigned as the zoning changes, so that's not predictable or constant. Voting precinct was thought of. Personally, I like the voting precinct idea. However, that actually included a lot of area, and it was noted that the Three Rocks area, as well as along Highway 18, was included in that, and that probably they don't have enough commonality with us really to make sense to include. And then tax zones. We have several different sets of tax zones, and I'll refer you to the 20 versions of the presentation that we have on this to look at the very different ones. For various reasons, they were not included. Two other options which we gave serious, we gave all of them serious, but I want to talk about more in depth is just staying with the current designation in the bylaws, and which is always an option. In fact, our philosophy of the subcommittee is that if we don't have a clear reason to change something, or if there isn't clear consensus on change something, we just stay the same. There's not going to be change for change's sake. So current designation in the bylaws is a possibility, and then using the NCAC, that is Nesquin Community Association. And I'm glad I spelled that out because I never remembered that right. Could use that. Then after we look at those, then I'll go through the proposals. I wish there was a live audience. That way I could gauge as to whether or not I should move on slower or faster. So I'm just going to assume that that's okay. Okay, leaving the boundary as it is. If we take the bylaws literally, that's a big block. Basically, it's the area between Cannery Hill, including Cannery Hill, to down here to Slab Creek Road. And there is no east-west boundary given. So it's in Tillamook County. So I assume that it's going to be bordered by Tillamook County. And that also includes Three Rocks and the highway. That didn't seem to be really the philosophy of having the commonality enough. So we're proposing not to use that, going with the current language, rather its intent rather than its letter. using the NCAA boundary is more bounded, but once again, they don't describe a west boundary. So it does actually technically include 3 rocks. And it's just about as big, just lops off the other half of the area from before. All those seem to be not very satisfactory in terms of having commonality in the community. Okay, well, the issues of using that are listed here, and basically, I just went through them. So we are once again are going with the philosophy of what probably was intended, talking to people, as opposed to what was actually written down. Now, that's a dangerous assumption, I understand. So we want to make sure that what we're interpreting is what the will of the community is. Okay, so the proposal number 1. First of all, I should say that it was pointed out to me in the last week that I had made an error in previous versions of this slide. It said that includes residences and businesses, and that should have been more inclusive because that actually excludes people. And it turns out that that phrase is not really necessary anyway. So we're going to drop that phrase, every responsibility within the Tillamook tax boundaries. And here's the original, here's the community. And here are the tax boundaries that seem to have all the people who have been active in NCAC are captured in here. Now, another error that I made was that I actually included this area as, although it's not in the text, it was on the map, and that is Cannery Hill. And that's kind of a special problem because the original bylaws said that including Cannery Hill and not being particularly specific about what they meant. Once again, talking to Bill Bush, and he says, well, we really should have said the southern part of it, but they didn't. So what they wrote is what they wrote. So that is a bit of contention. That actually includes Orrtown, and no one, to our knowledge, has participated in that. And we're not sure how much commonality people in Orrtown have with people in Nesquin. That's an unknown, but it doesn't seem likely that they would have the same sort of attitude of towards what their community is. Okay, and option number 2. So that was option number 1, which is basically this red line. Option number 2 is basically this blue line, and that is the watershed for Nesquin. That has some big advantages. And once again, for reference, here's what the arrows point to, and it does include the areas that we're talking about in terms of those people who are in a zip code, and also that includes the tax areas. A little bit of difference, but not a lot of difference. It has the advantage of having Nesquin depends on its water to survive. And what the first in our community plan, or excuse me, in the bylaws in terms of our purpose, the first one is land use and the second one is ecology. So this does speak to the ecology of the area that Nesquin has in its remit to take care of and be mindful of the ecology, and watershed is pretty darn ecological. I should have got a chuckle just then. I really miss a live audience. Okay, so I went through that fairly rapidly. If you want to look at what the comparison of the old and new text is, I have that. But for right now, I'd like to leave it open and get questions.
So I'm not seeing anything yet in the chat. So if you guys have any questions or comments, please put in the chat that you'd like to speak, and Susan will pick you.
I have put everybody to sleep.
You might just put the map back up, Tom.
All right.
while we're waiting for people? Because
Well,
would-
that's the one map. There's two maps.
well,
That one.
the watershed one that you were,
Okay.
So Sheila Clark,
Oh, yeah, there's a question. Sheila Clark would like to ask a question in the chat.
Thanks, Susan. Hi, Tom. I have a question
Hello.
in regard,
Yes.
hello. I have a question in regards to the community boundary.
Uh-huh.
To me, that makes the most sense, the Tillamook community boundary right there, the blue line. But you mentioned that the county said that that wouldn't work. Could you explain that?
Well, that's an indication I got from Sarah. Now, did I lie, Sarah? Um,
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can now.
Thank you. Okay. So as the question is in relation to the community boundary that's adopted as part of your zoning program versus the membership boundary, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, Tom. The membership boundary, when it was formed, when the community plan was done and the zoning updates for Nescoin in the late 90s, early 2000s, the membership boundary was established beyond the community boundary. That's part of the planning program. In my conversations with the commissioners, the expectation is that if there are proposals in the future to adjust the membership boundary to reflect either the community boundary or a different boundary, that boundary remain inclusive. There's a lot of folks that's recognized that live outside of the community boundary as adopted that identify as being part of the Nescoin community. So the intent of all of this as an advisory body to the county, the Nescoin CAC, is to ensure that the membership boundary remains inclusive. So whatever proposal is brought forward from the NCAC to me as the county liaison to the Nescoin community, I will share that with the Board of County Commissioners. But just since, Tom, if I may, please take just another moment, and Nancy.
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Had a lot of conversations with the commissioners individually and county council as I participated in this process with the bylaws committee that's doing a fantastic job. There's a couple of things, just to touch on quickly as we have this conversation today. One, again, the intent and expectation is that the membership boundary remain inclusive. Two, that these processes for boundaries and voting remain fair and equitable to all who identify as a resident of the Nescoin community. And that three, if there is a proposal or consideration in the future to reduce the membership boundary to the community boundary, that work not be completed in its entirety until this process, the community plan updates and other processes are done, as the membership as it is today with the boundary has already been participating in these important processes as they've moved.
Sarah, if I could just clarify, you mean a member of the NCAC as opposed to a resident, correct? Because there may be other types of people that are members than residents, correct?
So Nancy, that is correct. But for purposes of the advisory body of the Nescoin CAC as it was designed and set up, the intent is that the membership of the NCAC as an advisory body to the county, that it remain inclusive and fair.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So what we've interpreted that is, and we've agreed, is that we don't want to cut out anyone as a member who is currently a member. So that's kind of our intent going forward.
And a little history here. It's the area right in here that I'm indicating that wouldn't be included. And I got quite a bit of, shall we say, feedback that when I thought that down to Slab Creek meant down to where Slab Creek intersects 101, and put forward several maps with that as an assumption. I had since been corrected that there are many active people in NCAC who are down in this area.
Okay, so Sheila, does that answer your question?
It does. And if you don't mind, just one more question, just to help clarify or help my understanding. Is this the similar plan that other CACs follow? Like what Sarah had just said, and maybe she could advise on that it's people involved in the community, not necessarily the community boundary itself.
Sarah, could you take a stab at that?
Sure, I'm happy to address that. Each of the membership boundaries for the CACs are a little bit different. So we have various CACs throughout the county with unincorporated communities. Some follow the community boundaries when they were formed. Others include areas outside of the community boundary to encompass either lands that the community feels should be part of their community advisory process. So in this case, I think the watersheds are something that, you all have brought up as something that's important to you that would, be outside of your community boundary, or to ensure with the membership boundary that it is including areas where people live, that where they may not be wholly inside or inside the community boundary, they still identify and are identified as residents of a community.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think we need to go on to the
Thank
next
you.
person.
The next person, Nancy, is Roger Wickland.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Roger?
I'm confused as to why there is any confusion about the boundaries of the official Nesquin community boundary. There's a map on the website that shows all of the boundaries, including the east and west boundaries. So I don't see any confusion at all about what is the official community boundary. And as I've said many times before, it's my understanding that any advice sent to the county commissioners about land use issues, including the new community development plan, will apply only to those property owners within the official community boundary. If that's the case, I cannot see anything any more undemocratic than having people who live outside of that boundary making land use decisions for people inside the boundary. The idea of proposing a new larger boundary would only intensify that undemocratic process. And the other thing is that this assumes that the people in this larger boundary actually want to be in the Nesquin community boundary, which they may not want to be at all. I'd like to ask Sarah why we can't establish a new official community boundary based on the vote of the majority of property owners within that proposed boundary. So if you want to make a new boundary, why don't we just have a vote of the people within it? As I've said before, there's probably a lot of people like myself within the current official community boundary who would like to be excluded. So I don't know why we can't just have a vote, establish an official community boundary that everyone's happy with and use that. And if that cannot be done, then I would propose that any land use issues that are proposed to the county in the interim be voted on only by a single vote for each property taxpayer within the official community boundary.
So we haven't gotten to members yet, but what I'm hearing you say, Roger, is that you would like to see the community boundary changed. And if that can't happen, that you have that the NCAC boundary would be the community boundary. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, and maybe Sarah can clarify this, but it's I think she said at one time that any advice that goes to the county from the NCAC regarding the community development plan and other land use issues applies only to the official community boundary, which is defined by the map currently.
So
I'd like to make a comment on the map.
yes.
That's, I believe, not accurate. The existing text in our bylaws state that includes Cannery Hill to Slab Creek Road. That is the boundary of NCAC right now. And if we make no change at all, that's what it will continue to be.
Can you go back to that slide, Tom, and show what that difference is? So it's quite a bit larger than the proposal.
There it is.
Thank you.
That's the boundary if we don't make any changes. Right now,
Which boundary, the red or the green?
red, that red box.
No, that's not the boundary that's on the community, that's on the
Does-
NCAC website. The boundary
Doesn't
on the
matter.
website is, yes, it does. That's the only, the official boundary is the smaller one, not this bigger one.
So the
No, we're not-
boundary that's on the NCAC bylaws, which are what sets the boundary, it's not in a map, it's in wording. And we've got the wording that we can take to you, but Tom has mapped it. So,
Yeah, but the wording is vague, the map is not. That's my
Right.
point.
right.
Okay,
So Sarah,
so-
would you care to comment on Tom's question?
Make a quick clarification.
Or Roger, sorry, Roger's question.
So you have the community boundary, which is the designated state adopted boundary for Nescoin that identifies those properties that fall under urbanization for water, for sewer and for residential density, etc. Then you have, and that boundary cannot be changed. So there's the community boundary, which Tom has in blue, and then there's the membership boundary, which he had in red. The community boundary was what the county and the state adopted in the early 90s to identify the areas in Nescoin that were urbanized. And that boundary cannot be changed. That is a land use boundary that was established. So that's where your R1 zones are, your commercial zone, etc. The membership boundary was expanded to include the other areas that Tom highlighted in red. That boundary is not committed or obligated to a land use process. That is the boundary at the time when the community plan and all of the special zoning districts where those urbanized properties within Nescoin was determined to be placed. And as you can see, the membership boundary stretches farther than the community boundary because at that time it was identified that in relation to Nescoin, that red boundary identified everyone who felt like they were still a resident and had a connection and an interest in Nescoin. Likewise, the folks that live in Nescoin would have a connection and interest to land use proposals that extend outside of the community boundary, which I'm going to say again is the watershed. And quite frankly, going back through records, Cannery Hill, every once in a while, there's a proposal for a planned destination resort. I think the community would like to stay informed and have an opportunity to participate in that, even though it's outside of your boundary of your community by way of zoning and etc. So I think that door swings a bit both ways. To Roger's point, I just want to make a clarification too. Land use, so I'm going to say again, the NCAC is an advisory body. The NCAC does not make decisions. They advise and provide input to the decision makers, which is the Department of Community Development, the Planning Commission, and the Board of County Commissioners, primarily related to land use. Irrespective of a membership boundary, both the residents within the community that own property within the community and the residents within the membership boundary that own property outside of the community boundary and anyone else can participate in any land use decision. The state's land use program in and of itself is designed to be inclusive. So anyone can participate from anywhere. So I want to be clear in that in that advisory capacity, none of this is about decision-making. It's about advising and providing input and comments. But there is no exclusivity to any land use process. If it requires public notice, if it allows for public participation, quite frankly, somebody in Garibaldi who sees something posted on our website to review a land use proposal in Nescoin can participate in that process and also has appeal rights. So I want to, hopefully that helps alleviate this, who can participate, who cannot, respective of where that membership boundary is, because anybody can. If
But
it comes to
Sarah-
us for a decision.
Sarah, do the community development plan, the final advice that comes from the Nesquin committee now,
Mhm.
does that apply to the membership boundary, or does that apply only to the official Nesquin community boundary? I don't care who participates. I just care who votes on the land use issues. Because I think that people should only vote on land use issues that apply to their land use, not to someone near me. I mean, I can't vote on issues in Lincoln County, even though they affect me. I can't vote on anything in any other county that's near me that affects me. I don't care who participates, but when it comes to voting on someone's land use issues, I think that should be only the people to whom it applies.
So Roger, the state land use program in and of itself is not designed that way. When we're talking about a vote, what we're talking about is input in a land use process, which can happen anywhere. So the way, see how I can. If I get another proposal for a planned destination resort on Cannery Hill, even though it's outside of the community boundary, I'm going to notice the Nescoin CAC because the residents of the Nescoin community, and I say that in very broad terms, may want to participate or provide input in that land use review. I'm not going to limit the ability to solicit comments and feedback to only those properties that are immediately adjacent to that property. Same thing with Sitka Sedge, or excuse me, with Sitka Arts and Ecology. If I receive an application for something down there, which many of you are familiar with, that on occasion, they talk about updating their master plan, doing development, that matters to the community. I know that. I'm not going to limit and not give the NCAC notice and an opportunity to respond because it's outside of your boundary. So I think when we talk about the membership and voting and advising, I think that the CAC, and I'm going to use that in a broad term to the membership boundary. Do you want to be able to participate in all of these things that may be considered inside and outside of your community, with the recognition and understanding that they may or may not have an impact? You may or may not want to provide a voice. But this whole point is to make sure that the opportunity is there to provide that impact, that input as a community, and to do that in broad terms of not only where the community boundary lies for purposes of planning, which is your community plan document, but the community as a whole, which may extend outside of that boundary.
I might want
Okay.
to participate.
Roger, I'm going to just say we've got a bunch of other people who would like to ask questions, and we have a lot of material. So I'm going to thank you, but I'm going to move on if that's okay. And thank you, Sarah, very much. Who's next?
Bill Bush would like to comment on the watershed boundary next.
Okay, Bill.
I wasn't sure
Whoops.
if now was the appropriate time. I don't have a specific question. I just had comments about the importance of the watershed boundary.
And let me just mention that Bill's been working very closely with Tom and Wyatt on this and has provided the actual suggestion for this option. So.
Education, I would say.
So go ahead, Bill.
Okay, so the reason why I think the watershed boundary is important as a boundary for the NCAC is because it represents the area that has a direct impact on life in the Nesquin area. It also is a simple physical boundary that is unbiased. There was some confusion last time about the difference between the watershed and the watershed console. The watershed boundary is a topographic feature, just like the Continental Divide. But instead of directing water to the Atlantic or Pacific, it separates waters that flow into Nesquin Creek and its tributaries on one side, and on the other side to the north, it flows into the Little Nestucca River, and to the south, into the Salmon River. The reason why it's important is it's been important this far, but it's going to become increasingly important in the future. Just this past week, OSU scientists released a report in which they predict that in the 30 years following 2035, we're likely to see a doubling of wildfires in the Coast Range. And not only is that a problem, but if it's dry enough to cause increased wildfires, we might also start to worry about decreases in the water supply coming out of Hawk Creek. And on the opposite end of things, it's widely accepted that one of the consequences of global warming is that there's an increase in the intensity of storms that are striking our coastline. And just in our local area in South Beach, we've had 2 significant flooding events in the last 2 years, a frequency higher than you would expect. And that's all caused by stormwater runoff through Sutton Creek and Nesquin Creek. The map has a fairly long coastline to it. And the reason why that is so is because if you look at the beach in Nesquin, the driving factor that moves sand around are currents that flow to the north, wave-driven currents that flow to the north in the winter and south in the summer. And anything that happens up in Wainema or whatever has a direct impact eventually on the Nesquin beach. If you were to build some sort of barrier across the surf zone in Wainema, that would eventually result in a reduction in the amount of sand in front of Nesquin. And as far as I know, Wainema remains one of the 4 places designated by the Oregon Land Conservation and Development Commission as a potential site for wave energy development. So we have yet to see what that could bring. And then
So
the final
Bill,
thing
I'm going
is,
to ask you to wrap it up a little bit.
well,
It's been
the
2
final
minutes,
thing
but-
is that it often has been proposed as the beach disappears and the shoreline homes disappear, that Nesquin may eventually relocate into the forest and agricultural lands.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for all your input on this. Who's next, Susan?
Randall Cook has a written comment, which I will read, and that is, watersheds are maybe the most ancient demarcation of a border of a community, as water is the most critical element to forming and sustaining community.
Okay, thank you.
The next is Kat Nordland has a written question in the chat for Sarah, and that is, why would people living outside the Nesquin community boundary make recommendations to how affairs should be conducted to people living inside
think
the community
Sarah
boundary?
answered that.
Mhm.
Sarah answered that question.
Okay,
She
so you have
addressed
your
that
hand
question.
up, Kat. Do you still want
Yeah,
to
I have
ask
another
a question?
The other question I have is, why, there's a gap, area 31 and 32. So on the red line, why isn't the red just contiguous? Why is there a section 31 and 32?
Are you talking
you-
about this one?
Option 1.
No, that one. Why
This is
isn't 31 and 32 just contiguous?
30, 31 and 32.
No, the other map.
The watershed?
No,
This map.
no,
Okay, which map? This map?
that map.
Okay.
Do you see 31 and 32? Why,
Yes.
why does the red line leave those out?
That was based on the zoning of that area was forest and uninhabited. I can show you that. If you look at that map in the zoning, and if we zoom in on that, and you superimposed tax lots, if I can. And this is one of the choices that was made. Okay, here's 31 and 32. And there are 1, 2, 3 lots, essentially, 4 lots rather, in that. And that zoning is federally owned and vacant.
So,
I mean, it was arbitrary.
so I mean,
you
why,
know,
but why leave it outside? I mean,
that
I don't get it.
okay. Well, okay. Let me tell you what I think you're asking.
Well,
what
it's
the logic
federally
was.
owned and vacant.
Yeah,
Isn't
well,
that
no.
the answer, Tom?
Well, okay. The logic was, do members probably live there, or they probably don't live there? And that was, that's really the fundamental difference between the two options. One is it where people live, or is it where people are affected by the environment? And that's really the options 1 and 2. In fact, it would have been better to present it that way. This is where people live, and this is where people who live here are affected. Bill, would you agree with that?
Well, but other people, I mean, animals are affected, the watershed is affected by what happens on forest lands. The federal government could sell that land, they could develop that land. Why would that land be outside of the NCAC boundary proposal? I think it should be inside.
With option 2, it is inside.
Okay.
Okay,
And as I said, the only logic was where people live, and the other one is what area is affected and effects.
and so I think kind of the impression I've had is that we're kind of leaning toward option 2, but we want to hear input from all of you too.
Yeah.
Would that be fair? We haven't really, as a committee, we're bringing it really more to you guys. Who's next, Susan?
Helena Barecki has a comment in the chat, which I will read. I would just like to add that very helpful active members of the NCAC, including current and previous officers, live on Slab Creek Road, which is outside of the blue boundary.
Okay, thank you, Helena.
I
I'm
didn't.
guessing
I
she's
don't think
responding.
I don't think I heard that correctly, because my understanding is that this is the Slab Creek boundary and it is included in
I'll
the.
clarify, Tom, because it was on the other map where the blue boundary is the very small Nescoin community. Yeah.
Okay, it's not
That's
in the
what
blue
I was
band.
talking about in that comment.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. She's responding, I think, to some of the earlier comments, I'm guessing.
Okay, gotcha.
And who's
The
next?
next
Susan?
written comment is from Alex S. Some newer folks to the community may not know the community of Nesquin goes beyond the land use boundary Sarah is referring to. Slab Creek is culturally part of the community. And then Lynn Wintermute, also written comment, Nesquin Valley School is also on Slab Creek Road.
It's down here.
Let me see, we've got some more. Let me go here.
Alex S, I think, to everyone.
Yeah, Alex S then written comment, the larger area with its very small population can still provide input to CAC decisions that affect the area within the community boundary. And Helena Barecki, it's important to note that it would be unconstitutional to require property ownership for voting.
Okay, and I'll just mention on that one, we'll get to that in section 2.
Pat Einot, written comment, to Sarah's point, ORS 197.160 provides in part for CAC's, quote, broadly representative of geographic areas of interest relating to land uses and land use decisions. And written question by Barry Dragoon, why is section 31 excluded from Tom's proposed boundary? I think that was just covered, I believe.
Yeah, yes.
Alex S. written comment, sections 31 and 32 are forest land. Helena Barecki, written comment, if it's federally owned, the county doesn't have jurisdiction, maybe to prevent problems in the case that the federal government sells lands to Tillamook County, there could be a line, quote, if that happens, end quote. Those are all the comments so far.
Okay, so are there any phone members that would like to comment? Is there anyone on the phone at this point? Okay, are there any further questions or comments before we kind of ask you a few questions? Okay, and then we'll go to section 2, which does deal with who can be a member.
Is there any, I have a question, is there any disadvantage to having the watershed be the NCAC boundary? And like, anybody here from the water district? I mean, currently the water district is in charge of the watershed, correct? And there's a board for that, correct?
Tom or Bill
So-
Bush, would you like to answer that?
The water district isn't in charge of watershed. They just have a small part of it that they tap for their water supply. I mean, the watershed, again, is just a physical topographic entity of its own.
So is
Okay.
there any disadvantage to having the NCAC area of responsibility be the same as the watershed?
To
Tom,
my
sorry.
knowledge, no. But I'm not, I don't know what I don't know, but to my knowledge, no.
And Helena, we'll get to you in a moment. I think Tom Prohodich has a comment.
Yes, there's a written comment in the chat from Tom Prohodich. I support option 2 for the reasons Bill Bush gave and the additional ones he would have given with more time. And then Helena Barecki says, question before poll, please.
Helena, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to clarify that option 2 is it's the blue line on the map that's currently up. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Okay. Any other questions before we go to the poll?
Hey, Alex, just a comment on, to clarify the just so folks know, the watershed is concerned about the water district, pardon me, Nescoin Regional Water District. I'm a former member. They're concerned about a sub-basin of the Nescoin watershed. That would be Hawk Creek. And so I think to Bill's point, it simply points out that most of what we're focusing on with land use stuff is in the community growth boundary, but what comes down the watershed into town does have an impact on us. I don't think we are going to lose anything or have any disadvantages to including the larger boundary, primarily because most of it's owned by the U.S. Forest Service, and they really don't particularly care what's going on in Nescoin.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's a,
There's
Susan, I think
another
there's a
comment in the
comment.
There's another comment in the chat. Randall Cook says, our direct watershed for water use in the district is owned by a few local owners, but Weyerhaeuser owns most of it.
Okay, thank you. Tom Sipe, could you stop sharing and I'll get to the poll?
Okay.
We have another question, I'm sorry, that
It's
just
okay.
popped into the
They-
chat. Let me see if, let me see here, pardon me. Boyce Heidenreich, I hope I'm not butchering that last name, wrote, Sarah mentioned the importance of being inclusive, equitable, and fair. It seems to me that proposal 2 with larger boundary fits those criteria.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for your comments. And Tom, I think we're ready to
I'm attempting
go to the
to,
poll.
yes.
And let me see if I can do that. I hope I'm getting the right one. No. Stop share. I tried to get as few things as possible here. Let's try this one. This is looking promising. Well, what do you guys see on the screen?
See the directory, and the sharing is only you.
You just
These
see
are
a directory.
comments. Yeah. I mean,
Oh, that's-
see a browser with a directory of the NCAC library.
Really? Okay. This is not good.
It used to work last night.
I know. Sir.
There's an additional question that popped into the chat, which is Hillary G. Do we know if Weyerhaeuser and local owners within the watershed want to be included in the NCAC boundary?
I could speak to that. Besides Weyerhaeuser, some of the smaller family timberland owners include the Kowalski family, and they have been a participant in the CAC in the past. So I think it's fair to say that they do want. The Schlichtings are another property owner, not that far up the basin, but past the old golf course. They also have always been active participants in the community. So with the exception of Weyerhaeuser, again, we're generally not on their radar even. But I can tell you that the Water District has held discussions with Weyerhaeuser to let them know of their interest in acquiring their lands in the future. But beyond that, yeah, I don't think, again, we get on Weyerhaeuser's scale, or their radar rather.
Okay, thank you. I got the polls finally. Sorry, I'm a newbie at this. Are we ready to launch the poll?
Go for it.
Okay, you should see 2-question poll.
And we're not
Which
meant
bet?
to vote. Subcommittee members.
Right,
not meant to
subcommittee
vote.
members, please do not vote. Thank you, Tom.
Because I just almost did it.
And if you have any further questions, answer question 2 or comments. If you've already had that addressed, don't worry about that. Question 1. So right now we've got 25 respondents,
That's good.
27. Okay, I'm going to give you a few more seconds. Okay, speak up if you're still writing something. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. Okay, can everybody see the results of question 2? I don't think you can see question 1. So looks like option 2 is a favorite. A few that don't want any change. So I'll read it. So option 1 has 1 vote. Option 2 has 19 votes. The current boundary, no change, has 5 votes, and unsure or something else has 3 votes. And then under the questions for 2, we have Sheila Clark wrote, the blue boundary is shown on the map. Community boundary is noted by Tillamook County. Carol, THOKE, important to be inclusive. And Oregon Alex, thanks for coming up with these well-thought proposals. So we will have these quizzes actually put up on the website too at some point here, but this is good feedback for us. So thank you very much.
Nancy.
All right.
This
Yes,
is
Tom?
Perhodich. Could you read the raw numbers again?
Yes, the raw numbers are 1. And when I'm taking screenshots of these, Tom, so we'll put these
Okay.
up, but 1 out of 28. So there are 28 respondents, 1 for option 1 or 4%, 19 for option 2 or 68%, 5 for option 3 or 18%. Or excuse me, option 3 is not on option. Sorry, the current boundary, no change is 5 people, and unsure or something else is 3%.
Thank you.
Okay, I am going to stop sharing, or I'm not sharing. Tom, take it away for section 2. Thank you all.
Okay, so now on to section 2, which is membership considerations. The basic question here is, should we introduce a rule which will restrict the number of people who can be members, that is, who can vote? Some of the reasons for changing, consideration of the change is to, or not, is listed here. If I'll give you a minute to look at it, I won't bore you by trying to fumble through it, but there's
No, I
obviously.
think you should read it.
Okay, fair enough. Multiple owners could have undue voting power. Another person has said, the county said that NCAC should be inclusive rather than exclusive. And that would argue against, I assume, restricting the number of people. The people who live in Nesquin should have more say than the people who own interest in Nesquin. Residents outnumber owners, so owners' interest might be compromised. We need a level playing field between residents and business interests. I think not many people could argue against that. I'm sorry for the opinion on that. I'll try not to be opinionated. And seems undemocratic to prevent any resident from voting in their home community. That would happen if, for instance, there were 3 residents on a property. One of them would not be able to participate. So,
Well, with one of the options here.
with one of the options, I'm sorry, we take option 2. So there likely more opinions. I'm almost certain there are, and we will probably hear them today. This is all about restricting the membership. This process must yield a fair result. And for that, we pretty much agreed on the subcommittee, although we didn't actually vote on it. If one category of membership is limited, then all categories should be similarly limited. And that'll be reflected in the language that you'll see in just a moment. And once again, it's not clear if Tillamook County would approve restrictions on membership. So it is possible that this question is moot. It may not actually make a difference what we want. Sarah has said many times, inclusive rather than exclusive. This is a way of being a bit exclusive, but in a structured and we hope fair way. The default is to leave it as it is. Okay, so let's go on to option 1. And they're both, excuse me, they're both on the same screen this time, so that's at least a little easy, even if busy. One thing that I should call out to begin with, see this area that's kind of in a kind of a light green or a light blue, depending on whether it's my wife or me looking at it. We differ on what color that is. The property owner and the holder of a beneficial interest would probably, it would be wise in this particular case of having a restriction, that be an or, and Tom Brahovich could probably, will undoubtedly speak better to that if that's a question, but likely will, in our definitions, we'll just merge these two. There will be instances where there might be some people here and there for the same property. That's more lawyering than I want to do. So I think maybe if we combine those, it's not that bad. So that's the reason for that highlight. The difference between these two options is this highlighted area here in yellow. And that is for each property up to 2 authorized persons, maybe authorized, that's kind of in contention right now, can qualify for each category type, which means a resident, you may have a couple of residents, you may have a property owner, or a couple of property owners, and if there happens to be a business on top of that, you may have a couple from there. So you could have 6 people on a particular property. That is, whereas over here, it's unlimited. So we have, to our knowledge, this lack of limitation has not created any undue voting blocks. We don't know, but we don't believe that that's true. We unfortunately, we don't have a good record of who is what in this, and we'll address that. Wyatt will address that in a minute. But basically, the difference between here is that the membership this is status quo as we've evolved it. And this is limiting to 2 persons. Now, we have some variants and we'll go through those, but I think the initial question needs to be, should we restrict the membership or not? And do we leave it the way it is, or do we put a cap on each one of these categories? And I think that
So
would be,
if you could go back, Tom, I think we've spent quite a bit of time on this issue, and the reason it came up in the first place is that there was a possibility that one property could end up having, you know, if you've got it owned by a trust or several different entities, that they could have undue influence if there were, say, 10 or 20 or 40 people owning a property, whether they're residential or not. And so that's where we were looking at the possibility of having a limit. And that could have undue influence. And so that opened up this whole can of worms. Where would we do a limit, and what would be limited, and resident versus property, non-resident property owner, and all of that. So by keeping it where it is, it's certainly simplest. If we change it to possibly change that undue influence, then option 2 is what the committee was putting forward as a possibility. And although saying property owner or holder of a beneficial interest in real property based on something Tom Perhodich had brought up. So any questions and comments? How are we doing, Susan?
Okay, there's a comment from Randall Cook for for section 1, the previous, he said, thanks to Bill Bush for research. Maria McGarry Barnes on this section 2 made the comment, taxation without representation. Let's see. Liz Vitale has a written comment question. For option 2, is a property considered an address or a deed? What happens with multiple homes that share an address?
Can you answer that, Tom or Wyatt?
well, you have to break them out a little bit. One question at a time.
Okay,
So
first question is a property considered an address or a deed?
it is considered the tax lot.
Okay, the second question is what happens with multiple homes that share an address?
In this particular, well, in which case, that would be considered one property. However, there may be residents. So you can call it, this is a qualification. If you satisfy one of these things, then you're qualified to be a member. Now, you can qualify as a resident or you can qualify as an owner. With the option 2, only 2 residents would be able to register as members. With option 1, you basically if you had 5 people living in 2 different domiciles, you would have 5 members.
So I guess a question.
I hope that answers the question.
To clarify that question, with multiple homes that share an address, wouldn't there be like an apartment number or something like that typically?
There'd normally be a unit number, Nancy, for the post office anyway.
Mm-hmm.
There are some homes that's not true for in Nescoin. There's multiple separate dwellings that don't have like a number or a letter attached, but they all share the same address. And I'm thinking of one example where there are 6 residents at the same address, and they're all very active members.
Very interesting.
Yeah, could you send us an email with that exact address, Liz, we could look into?
Nancy, if those people are are residents, it wouldn't make any difference anyway. They would have the right to vote.
Well, it would be on option 2.
For option 2.
Under option 2, they would not. You would only have 2 of those people be able to vote.
Yeah, Tom, I'm not sure I read it that way, but I think one of the things we need to do is wordsmith it.
I've submitted it as good as I can. What would be unclear?
I don't think you can bar a resident of the NCAC boundary area who is a legal resident from voting.
That would be option one. And as I mentioned before, it's not clear that we would be allowed to do this. But this has been asked for and we're responding to the request.
So
I'm not
seems like
advocating
even our
either one.
committee's a bit confused a little bit about the two options, but you know, that's we've gone back and forth with many iterations, and at one point we were looking at there would be no limit on residents, but there would be a limit on property. And then we got quite a bit of pushback that that's not fair. So that's why the one coming out of the committee was, as an option, was restrict the number of people who would be members to a maximum of 2 per category, where the categories would be resident, property owner, and we're now saying or holder of a beneficial interest in real property, and then business owner.
To clarify, our wording in option 2 is limited to each property.
Right.
So if we're not, a resident is not qualifying for membership based upon a property, they're not limited by that particular limiting language.
Well, that devolves back to the definitions of what those things are. A resident is somebody who is on a property, and I guess I can bring that up if we want to look at those definitions. Probably would maybe useful. Let me stop sharing while I've fumbled that, and let's take other questions.
It's also good to mention, Tom, that we did, even in option 1, we added that 3rd bullet to clarify, because people who are, say, representatives of a trust weren't in the original bylaws.
Yeah. So do I need to go find the definitions?
Well,
I thought you had them.
Let's try to find out how people feel about it.
Okay.
So why don't we go to the chat?
Okay, so the next question, Jeff Weitzel has a question.
Well, more of a comment.
Pardon me.
I'm going like with my secretary hat on, I'm going to point out that the NCAC does not have the capacity to verify anyone's eligibility for membership, even for option 1. It's 100% on the honor system. So in option 2, it would just be on the honor system, like, please don't have more people coming to vote than you're supposed to. And given that option 2 is quite complicated, I don't know, a lot of people might have trouble, like in these complicated situations where there's owners and residents and maybe, like Liz pointed out, there's lots out on Slab Creek Road where there's a bunch of houses on the same property. That in these complicated situations, people may not even be able to figure out what they're allowed to do anyway. So given that all of this is on the honor system, I don't know that there's like a huge benefit to having more complicated rules. Like I think simple probably is better. And as you mentioned, we don't know of any cases where a bunch of people from one property have swung a vote or something like that. So
Okay, thank you, Jeff. And everybody, I didn't know Jeff was here in the meeting earlier when I was introducing, but Jeff is our NCAC secretary, and beyond that, he's also our webmaster and all sorts of other activities that sort of loosely fall under the secretary role, and he's been a tremendous tech support for us on this committee, and you particularly. So
I'd like to go back
Jeff.
to make sure that I answered all of the questions because they were stacked. Did I get through all the questions?
There's some
Susan?
more. So Susan,
Yeah.
who's next?
The next written question is from Kat Nordland. Does a resident include someone who lives here but not own?
Yes, but it is independent. You can qualify for one criteria. If you happen to be a resident, well, done.
Yes,
you're
it includes
done and dusted.
renters.
It
It does
includes
include
renters.
renters, yeah. Or other types of residency.
Next-
And
next
that'll be
question.
covered by the definitions when Tom goes over there.
Next written question is from Candace Miller. What happens if a person or persons is renting a home or condo but does not own the property? Does the owner and the renter get to vote?
That seems to be the way that you would have to have it. Yeah.
So in option 1, definitely. In option 2, up to 2 each category.
Written
One
question-
thing,
oh,
one
sorry.
thing that wasn't mentioned also is that it's in the slide, but regardless of how many categories you qualify under, because some people could qualify under 3 categories, you get 1 vote.
Yeah. That's it.
Next written comment is Helena Barecki. Agreed, I think limiting adult residents from voting is completely wrong. Next question, Carol Hoke. Could we have a preliminary poll to see where we stand? To be inclusive, the option 1 seems appropriate. And then next person, Pat Einot, I have a question and a comment. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess my comment is this: even under the existing bylaws, it's apparent that membership was intended to be applicable to individuals, humans. And there could be some confusion with complicating things by using the term person. And I haven't seen the definitions, but person in the law includes entities, and certainly there are properties that are owned by entities. And when I say entities, I mean corporations, limited liability companies, maybe limited partnerships, things of that nature. Entities don't include trusts, like family trusts. So if you have, we're talking about qualification for membership. We're not talking about 1 vote per property if I own 5 properties. So I think that option 2 is extremely complicated for some of those reasons. But I also think defining membership as either an individual who is a permanent resident or whose primary residence is in the Neskowin area, and a property owner, and a business owner, if they're operating a business on property that's zoned for business operation, that would do it. Because then if property happens to be owned by an entity, the entity would act like any entity would act. And that is an LLC has a manager or designates a member to act on its behalf. A corporation has an officer, designates someone to act on its behalf. If property is held in a family trust, there's a trustee who's designated to act on its behalf. Once we qualify those as members, individuals, then you've got the structure of who votes. And this holder of a beneficial interest concept then would merge away or go away. And it would eliminate the concerns that you articulated about having property owned by an LLC where you've got 8 members because it's a family LLC or something of that nature. And, I know you may have already discussed this in prior meetings, but when you say membership is open to all persons, you could get into a situation down the road where people want to argue about who is a person, because in law, a person could be an entity. Whereas if you have an individual who's 18 years old or older, which is kind of the tone of this membership paragraph, then if to qualify for membership, some owner that's an entity's got to designate an individual to be its member. I mean, that to me makes more sense, because otherwise I could transfer my property to my family trust and I've got or to my LLC, and I may have 10 members, and that doesn't seem like for me to qualify as a member who's voting, that I could then add 9 or 10 more people as voting members, if that makes sense.
So are you saying that you're saying that article or this second option would, I mean, that's the way it would be necessary to prevent that situation, correct?
No, I don't think so, because under option 2, for each, you're mixing the concept of qualifying for membership for each property. And I think the concept really is intended to be, how does one qualify for membership? So if I own 3 houses on my block in my name, I'm still one member. I don't get 3 votes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the voter.
You get 1 vote, right?
I do. And whereas
regardless, yeah.
But if
Shall we go to Tom and the definitions real fast,
Yes,
and then we'll get back to you, Pat?
First of all, we did specify natural person, so that eliminates that problem. It's very well defined. And the option 1 versus option 2 is, option 2 puts a cap on the number of people who would qualify under each category.
I agree, and I read that, and my last comment to you is this. I think the beneficial interest concept broadens membership way beyond where it should be, because, well, I don't know the definition.
Okay, as you may have noted, I did say that we are looking strongly at combining beneficial interest in owner and putting it in as an or. And I suspect we will probably do that, but we need to contemplate that as a subcommittee. I can't make the subcommittee commitment at this point, but it does seem like these two, having an or between the two of them, would make sense.
Okay, can I ask one last question then? When you have the definition of business, you're talking about a business like the cafe or the store. You're not talking about the business of having short-term rentals. Is that right? The human person is a natural person.
Well, but
sorry, we're getting additional comments here. So Wyatt or Tom, do you want to answer Pat's
basically,
question
that's
here?
our definition. I am not qualified to just judge whether or not that includes STRs.
Sure. Well, like Gray Fox Rentals is a business. Of course it would.
If it's a
Right,
registered,
but what I'm
registered
saying,
business,
okay,
if it's a registered business in the state of Oregon, then it would be considered a category. Now, I'll make the observation, Bree, is that the more complicated the rules are, the more people seem to be motivated to violate them.
I also want to just mention, I think Jeff's comment about we've discussed policing versus the honor system have come down pretty firmly on the idea of the honor system on all this too. So I just want to move on. I thank you for these comments. They're very helpful, but we've got, if you want to speak, please put in the chat that you want to speak. So who's the next one, Susan?
The next question is from Boyce Heidenreich, and the question is a property under option 2 considered to be Proposal Rock Inn or an individual unit at Proposal Rock Inn?
I can answer that. Proposal Rock Inn, there's 2 sections of it. One is those units are owned individually, and those people would be considered to be a property owner separate from the property itself, meaning the unit of Proposal Rock Inn. If it's a business that operates and rents 28 units, i.e. a hotel, which is one of the units or sections of Proposal Rock Inn, that would be a single business.
Okay, thank you.
A written
Um,
comment from Maria McGarry Barnes. Again, if inclusivity is the goal. Next comment from Alex Sifford, individual tax lots at both Proposal Rock and Nesquin Resort. Next, one moment, let's see. Next comment, Barry Dragoon, one person, one vote, only as far as I'm concerned. Kat Nordland, her hand is up. She has a question.
Go ahead, Kat.
I'm just, I want to ask where the yellow highlighted part of option 2 comes from. Was there some abuse in the past? Was there an incident that occurred that, I mean, I guess I'm confused about why we are complicating it.
Okay, let me answer that. We initially started with some inputs that there was some concern that there was a potential for abuse or potential for overrepresentation, not necessarily abuse, but overrepresentation. If you have people who have multiple people who have title, a shared title, you could conceivably have 24 people from one property. That has not happened, but it could possibly have happened. So if we were asked to look at how do we cap that, how do we prevent that sort of thing, this is a solution to that. The only solution that I was comfortable with, and I believe that the rest of the subcommittee was comfortable with, is applying any cap evenly across the board. And that's the origin of that, is that the concern that there was a potential for overrepresentation of a particular subgroup.
Okay, thank you, Tom. I'm not sure that the NCAC has it within its purview to limit people's voting rights. So, you know, and so I think I just want to say, I think you need to be very careful because
that's what we would, if for instance, option 2 was desired or by the membership, then it has to go past Tillamook County, who could say no, and it goes away.
And I think we're kind of hearing most people like option 1 will go to the poll soon, and I know we've got some other comments, but Sarah, do you have a comment on whether we're just spinning our wheels on option 2? You're familiar with one example we have. It hasn't been a problem at all in the past, to answer your question, Pat, too. But if there were something where you could get 40 votes from one property because of multiple owners holding multiple deeds, do you feel like that is something that the county would consider limiting, or should we just be sticking with option 1 and not worrying about it? I'll put you on the spot, Sarah.
No, that's fine. Happy to do it. That's what this meeting's all about, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think option 2 is going to be a difficult approach for county buy-in. Option 1 is what all of the CACs have. And the concerns about overvoting or properties with multiple owners has not surfaced as a concern, or where we have found compromised any processes to date.
Okay, thank you. And I would imagine that could be revisited if we ever saw a concern happen, although probably not quickly enough to resolve the immediate concern should it come up. Okay, thank you, Sarah.
And it is also the most, again, it is the most inclusive.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. So, I mean, I think that kind of says it all, right? I mean, I'm really sensing that this has been a really helpful discussion, but if so, we still have some people in the chat.
Yeah, Tom Prohodich is he's had his hand raised.
Okay.
Yeah, I have supported something like option 2 And particularly Sarah's comments, but also Patty's comments and Jeff's comments are with an open mind, making me change my mind. But I'll tell you how I got there. At the very beginning, Sarah apparently told, as she said today, that we want to have inclusive membership and voting. And one of the options that was put on the table was that could mean, and it's been discussed in several of the meetings, that one home that has 24 members, or all of whom I think have deed title to the home, I could be wrong about that, they would get 24 votes. And so where I came down, given that was the problem, or I saw that as a problem, where I came down was, well, what we ought to do, we don't want, given the history of the NCAC and the fact that there have always been three categories, as I understand it, of participation and voting, which are residents, property owners, who can be non-residents, and business owners. We have to keep those numbers equal because that's been the way it's been historically done. So you can't give a disproportionate number of votes to residents over property owners or property owners over residents. So on the other hand, the problem was if it's a possibility, and what I will say about this is that it's better to nip these problems in the bud now rather than to wait when they come up, because it's going to be very difficult to amend any bylaws by 2/3 vote, which is what's being proposed. But if in the future you have voting blocks of dwellings that have the potential to cast 24 votes, while that appears to be inclusive, it can be exclusive to particular other blocks. For example, residents. I think it's probably mostly vacation homes that have multiple owners. And so that was my concern. But if it's going to turn out that it's too complicated to do and that's not where the commissioners are going to go, then I'll back off on that. But that's how I got there.
And that's kind of how we were all getting there. So thank you for that clarification, Tom. Who's next?
There's written comment from Helena Barecki, and she also has her hand raised. So I'll read her written comment and then she can ask a question. Given that this is an advisory committee to the county, it would make sense that you have to be registered to vote in Tillamook County in order to be part of the CAC. Though since this is on the honor system, maybe that's just useless extra language.
So basically what you're saying, Helena, is that you feel like you would have to be a resident only. So go ahead and speak to your question.
I would like to, yeah. So in listening to one of the other speakers, like I was like, oh, wait, this is I just want to talk a little bit about what a community is and what the Community Advisory Council is intended to do. Like, I think we probably all have some slightly different definition of what a community is, but like I'm on the community emergency response team. Like if I lived 2 hours away, I wouldn't be able to participate in like being helpful on something like that. That's community, right? People who do like people who do things in the community, people who like get together in the community, people who participate in the school, people who participate in beach cleanups, etc. Right? Like you have to basically be here to do that. So like I think we probably all have some slightly different definition of what a community is, and I think mine changes, but like community means something. And I think we should think about that. And the second thing is we're an advisory council to the county. And that's to give the community advice. And like a business like Gray Fox, they have plenty of interaction with the county. Like they have people whose job it is to go talk to the county. And so I think I'm not proposing anything in particular, but I think that that who's having a say in the community advisory council should really be beneficial to the county rather than a replica of something they're already getting a lot of. So I guess that's my comment. And I do think that being registered to vote in Tillamook County, I mean, we could probably get a roster of who within the community boundary is registered to vote or just who's voting in Tillamook County. And if you had a question, like any member could check off like, hey, are they actually registered to vote here? Because sorry, I'm gonna try to wrap this
Well,
up.
I think you've made your point, and I appreciate that. So basically what you're saying is that they need to be a resident. Yeah.
And
So-
you could own, you could be a property owner who rents out their property and be registered to vote here and live somewhere else.
No, actually you can't. No, you have to be registered to vote where you live. So really what you're saying is resident, I believe, unless Wyatt, correct me if I'm wrong there, but
Well, I
I'm
think
pretty
there's a
sure.
difference between a resident who this is their primary place of residence, even though they may not be registered to vote. And I think Sarah addressed that in one of our earlier meetings, and I may defer to her shortly, but the county has a problem with us requiring a registration to vote as opposed to having a person who is a resident but chooses not to vote. And there are some people who sometimes religiously or otherwise choose not to vote in matters of government.
Right. Okay, thank you. I'm going to move us on.
There's one more written comment, sorry.
Okay.
I'll read it. Kat Nordland writes, an LLC, which may be owned by multiple members, generally has a legal representative or a trustee. And as you might know, a property held in trust also has one representative. I do not see multiple ownership of a property being a problem. NCAC is advisory only. Why wouldn't the committee want, let me see, scroll down here. I'm not seeing more comment after that, so
Why wouldn't the committee want as much input to make advice as possible? I think the committee would want that input. So thank you, Kat. Actually, I think trusts can actually have more than one or two representatives.
Liz Talley would like to comment.
Okay, Liz. And then we're really getting quite late on time, and we still have two more much simpler but sections to go to. So
We think.
so Liz, I'm going to take your comment, and then I think Pat has one more, and then how about we cut it off and go to the poll? Would that be okay with everybody? And please keep your comments fairly short. So Liz?
Yeah. Yeah, this has been really interesting to listen to, and I really am understanding about it seems like people coming to agreement more on option one, and I might be there myself, but I just wanted to voice that I shared Tom's concern of essentially properties with many owners really washing out the voice of residents. And I'm still nervous about that if we were to go with option one. But with option two, I would hate to see any resident restricted from voting just because there are more than two residents on a property. So, and I just want to say thank you to Helena for voicing those comments about community. I think that's so important to keep in mind in all of these discussions. And my reason for feeling nervous about resident voices getting washed out with option one is that we're living out our lives here. We're affected in every way by decisions that are made versus people that don't live here. I understand they're concerned about their property and their property values and whatnot, but that's different than a life. It's a piece of property. It's something material. It's not a human life that's affected by decisions that are made. And I would just appreciate real consideration given to this. And before these last couple of years, I don't think I ever felt concerned about this, but I am now because of the way that we have been treated by non-residents over these last couple of years, including most recently this basically attempted gerrymandering Slab Creek out of the NCAC.
Okay, let me just clarify that really fast. There was no intent to keep members out. We were just not aware when we were drawing the initial
It
maps,
was-
so that it was
no,
just
I'm not-
inadvertent, totally inadvertent.
I'm not,
Totally
Nancy, I'm not-
inadvertent.
I'm
As
not-
soon
I'm
as
not
we
talking-
heard that there were members out there on Slab Creek Road, immediately we changed and included them immediately.
That comment is not directed to anyone on the bylaws committee. But there are people out there who brought that suggestion in, and that's what's concerning to me. It's not the bylaws committee.
Okay, the people who are talking about having everything in the blue bag. Got it. Okay, thank you. Pat, very quickly.
I can read it.
That'd be
Membership-
great. Thank you.
Membership
Susan.
qualification can be inclusive and simple. 1, individual whose primary residence is here. 2, individual property owner, or if an entity, individual designee, if a trust, designated trustee. Or 3, business owner operating on business zoned property.
Okay, thank you for that. We will take that under advisement. Thank you. And so now, is it okay if we go to the poll?
2 more comments. I can
Oh,
just read them.
okay.
Sorry.
Uh-huh.
I want to make sure we include everyone.
Definitely, thank you.
Candace Miller, I also agree with Liz and Tom. Carol Hoke, it would be prudent to have votes from permanent residents, sometimes over a full membership vote for more targeted information.
Okay, thank you.
Can you make one very short comment? This is Tom Perhatis.
Sure, go for it, Tom.
I'm going to support option 2 today because I would like the discussion about this to be more fully considered in the time period between now and the next membership meeting on March the 8th. I still think that I've been concerned about voting since 1960, and I've taught voting rules and rights, and I've written about them, and I want to be sure that we come up with a rule that's fair to everyone and equitable to everyone.
Did you just stop talking?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Yeah, maybe you should join our committee. We have one more.
One more written comment.
Okay.
One more written comment. Hillary G, in a community with nearly 70% seasonal home ownership, it is not equitable to limit votes of a particular group of people, but not another group.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Hillary. Thank you, Susan, for reading everything. Can you go ahead and stop sharing, Tom, and I'll launch the poll? And thank you. This has been quite the discussion. So we hadn't actually put an end time. I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll. But as you're reading it, think about whether we could spend another 45 minutes or so on sections 3 and 4.
Yeah, why doesn't show up as much, but we can try it. You see it?
Okay, I'm seeing 25.
Light.
Could someone mute themselves, please? I think we're hearing a conversation. Okay, I think we're at the end because there are 5 of us committee members still here and 28 showing up. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Share results. Can everybody see the results? I'm going to read them because I understand you guys can't see the numbers. Option 1, no change, would be 11 out of 28 or 39%. Option 2, limit of 2 members per property per category with 1 vote per member, 14 out of 28 or 50%. And unsure or prefer something else, 3 out of 28 or 11%. And on the comments, we have from PIHNAT, needs work, definitions need work too. Thank you. Sheila Clark, option 1 is the most inclusive and fair. Maria Sangria, inclusiveness and representation of the shareholders includes more than the few full-time residents, which until recently was an anomaly. I don't know who this person is. NCAC and the county are flirting with a constitutional challenge if voting rights for one group are limited. Helene, please consider the role of the CAC and the meaning of community. And Carol Hoke, I prefer more work on the definitions. So I thank you very much for that. So now going back to where we are people willing to stay and tackle section 3, which is relatively short and easy? Or do you want to end after another poll? How many people, show of hands, we'll do it that way, would like to go on and tackle section 3?
Nancy, are you referring to committee members as well?
Sure.
I would like to tackle it.
I bet you would, Wyatt. Okay, how many would like to leave right now or after we do a final poll and go home? So if you already put your hands down, gosh, this is hard to read, isn't it? Polls are better. Okay, I think we had more hands up for going ahead. So let's go ahead and for those of you who feel like you need to leave, that's fine. But thank you very much. Tom, thank you for presenting 1 and 2.
Could we add one more thing, which is those people who have problems with the definition, please send your preferred definition to the committee so that we can consider it properly.
That sounds great. And Pat may be one of those that put it in the chat. She had a definition there in the chat too.
Yeah, it's in
you.
Article X on the in the library, the most recent version.
And we can send out a link. Thank you very much, everybody. We do have a final question about the meeting that we could do before we get into section 3 for those who are going to be leaving. You see where we're at. We're at 33 still. Well, let's just go ahead and go to section 3. Wyatt. Tom, do you want to share?
Okay. It's out to did things out of order. I brought up the thing without sharing first.
Oh, the definitions.
All right. And we'll go into the mode. Here we go.
Yeah, this is pretty self-explanatory, but the whole idea here is that we're trying to be as transparent as we've historically been. And I don't know that there is anything we need to add to this at all, but I think we're looking for comments from people about what, if anything, does not meet expectations here.
So why don't you go to the slide that shows the change?
So it's no actual change. We might move it, but no actual change.
Okay. I thought we did have a change on that.
That's
From
not
the
the
original.
original change in. Yeah.
Okay.
I think we might be able to ask for any objections to leaving it as it is.
The silence is deafening.
Does anyone have any questions? Gosh, why do I think that we had some other stuff? I thought before it had something about posting and anyway, but I guess not. So
Well,
really, I think this
actually,
is
no,
pretty
the
self,
modification was that shall be available to members.
right?
And just dropped, it'll be available on the website. It was
Yeah, that's what I thought.
unclear how the members were to be notified. And apparently I have, apparently my hyperlinks didn't work right.
Okay, because somewhere there was a different slide, I thought.
Yeah, there
Anyway,
was a different one. Yeah, okay, I think I can find it.
there it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, my hyperlink missed. Available to each member and shall also be posted. This is messing up. Pardon me. Tried to get fancy. Okay, we'll go back to section 3. So at any rate, the difference is essentially that we eliminated the shall be available to every member. It's because it's not only members that these things are available, it's available to the world. So that was redundant.
So basically, we just simplified it and said it'll be
Yeah.
available on the website. Are there any objections to this? Oh, Mark, thank you for joining us. Okay, are there any comments? Should we quickly go to a poll, or does anyone have any objections? We probably don't even need to poll this one.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just assume you like this, and let's go on to section 4.
Okay. Take it away.
Wyatt?
Let me just read this real quick. Yeah, I think this is probably something that we may want to tweak down the road when we finally get done with the first part of membership and voting. But it seems to me that if we're going to try to qualify people based upon property ownership, we're going to have some form, I think Jeff pointed this out, frankly, of determining and having them declare what their basis for property qualification is to vote. So this is kind of a simple way of doing it without requiring a whole lot of background work or checking, so that we can have some idea that people are, in fact, qualified to be able to exercise that right.
Okay, do you want to show the proposal?
Okay. And and I'm pretty sure this one works right. Okay. It's a substantial change to the bylaws, only in the fact that some of this information gets moved out of this section, but it's much more, rather than just the signing in the sheet and the name and address. It is more explicit, and also lists what qualification for the membership is. And also specifies a mailing address and a local NESCOIN address, because we may want to be able to contact people.
So we found this to be useful when we had the June meeting, and that was the first time that I understand that people actually needed to put in what their NESCOIN address was if they're a non-resident property owner, and what their actual address was. And it was helpful data in mapping where our residents are. So we're proposing doing a one-time establishment of membership, and then possibly an annual reestablishment with a simple form. It wouldn't be a lot, but that would be contained. And then the rest of it all gets moved to Article 5, which will be talked about next Saturday, which is meetings. And so all the stuff on the right gets moved over to meetings. So
let me add something just to hopefully prevent any distress. Local NESCOIN address probably needed to be a broader definition than that, because you may have a vacant lot. So we'll have to tweak that. A local property or something like that, but we'll tweak that to include anybody who has
Even a
some-
vacant lot can
even
have
a
a
vacant
tax
lot.
ID number. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
tax ID number. It may not have an
tax lot
address.
number.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so we'll have to
Or tax lot,
tweak
yeah,
that.
something like that.
Yeah.
So does anyone have any questions about section 4? Susan?
Yes. Kay Wyatt has the comment, would the new text be made available on the website? I'd be concerned about privacy issues.
I'm sorry, say that again, Susan?
Would the new text be made available on the website? I'd be concerned about privacy issues.
We would
You-
not.
As far as the application?
No,
mentioned
he's
to
talking
speak
about the
up.
record. Where we would not be putting people's private information on the website.
No.
I don't believe, no. Sarah, we would not need to publicize people's private information, correct? When I read Oregon Public Meeting Law, that's the kind of thing that would not be required.
That is correct. However, because this is an advisory body to the county, your documents are subject to public record.
Except this would be an exception, right? With people's names and addresses. When I read Oregon Public Meeting Law, that's an exception.
We would have to route that through county council because your
Okay.
documents, if you're retaining documents,
Right.
that's where I'm concerned. But I can ask that question, Nancy.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that, Sarah,
Got
because I personally wouldn't want my information out there like that. So very good question, Kat.
Thank you.
And thank you, Sarah, for following up. Carol.
Her written comment is, with the onset of Zoom meetings that open the attendance to participants not physically in Nesquin, this is a good process.
Okay, thank you.
And Jeff Weitzel has a comment.
Great. You're on, Jeff.
Okay, yeah, you've heard this before. This basically goes back to the capacity thing that maintaining this roster would be a considerable amount of work, and we don't have a staff. We've just got volunteers. And more importantly, I don't know what we would do with this roster. Like we don't have the ability to verify any of the information in it. We don't have the, like it would be a big lift to just use it to like have people check in, like, or have a sign-in process for meetings. So I feel like this is sort of a solution in search of a problem where if we were a different kind of organization, something like this might make a lot of sense. But being the kind of organization we are, this is a bunch of hullabaloo and effort and work that does not really solve a problem for us. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you. So we're not talking about having people put all this in every time they sign up for a meeting though, right? This is like a once a year kind of thing, or once every, when people become members. You wouldn't find anything useful as an officer to understand who your members are and where they are, to have any
so
data?
As we discussed in the executive meeting the other day, there are other solutions to that which are much lower overhead, which is just like ask people to voluntarily provide their address and whatnot. But in terms of making it, putting it anything in the bylaws where like we are required to do it, I think that is, yeah, like I guess I'm speaking with passion because I would be required to do it.
Yeah.
And I am already doing a lot.
Hey, Jeff.
Yeah.
Jeff, do we even need the baseline text, let alone the new text?
I would say no. I think the baseline text came from an era when people were meeting in person and you would have them sign in and keep paper records.
Well, you're kind of doing that now when people sign up for the meeting though, right?
We get their email address and we don't actually do anything with it. So I would say, if anything, like as Wyatt alluded to, we want to do less. So if we can specify what the purpose of having a roster is, then we can say, okay, what is the lowest overhead means of solving that problem? But I have strong opposition to inventing extra stuff that doesn't solve a problem for us, that doesn't have a purpose. Like speculating, well, if we had all this stuff, then we could do something with it. That's true, but I think like putting that like enshrining that into the bylaws, just sort of on spec is a little bit strong. So.
Okay, thank you for your input, Jeff. Who's next, Susan?
Tom Perhatich has a question.
Yeah, I have a question for Jeff. Jeff, I understand your frustration. It's your comment on the last issue that's making me reconsider option 2 on membership and voting. But here's the question. When we sign up for one of these Zoom meetings and we get something back that says you're registered, is it the case that anybody could sign up? Or is it only?
Yes, and anybody could sign up. If you have an email address, you can sign up.
So you don't have to be a member.
Correct. We're not checking who shows up to the meetings. So, and at the meetings where there was an officer election, which was actually before my time, so I don't actually have personal experience of this, we also had people enter an address so that we could have a notion that everyone who was signing up was eligible to vote in the NCAC. But even there, it's on the honor system. We're not pre-registering people and making sure people are who they say they are and confirming that their address exists and all of that stuff. So it's
there wasn't validation, but you had to put in how you were a member and what your Nescoin property is and what your mailing address is and how you're a member. I mean, so it provided really good data for us to be able to use on where members were for setting up the boundary stuff. So it was helpful.
If we want data, let's collect data and let's not put it in the bylaws. That's my position. Like we decide we need data, we can make a project.
We've heard you. We've heard you.
Jeff, one other question for you. If in fact, before a vote being taken before the committee, whether it's a vote for officers or a vote on a proposal of some form or another, the president just outlined what the qualifications for voting were to the people attending and asked those who qualify to vote and those who did not to refrain. Is that sufficient in your opinion?
If we thought that people were showing up to meetings who were not qualified to vote, so I guess if you're asking if we should put in the bylaws that will have a verbal nudge to on the honor system, not vote.
Not at all. I'm just talking about as a matter of procedure before each meeting.
I think that also is a solution for a problem that we don't have, or that I suspect we don't have. But that would not cause a lot of overhead. It would just be a little bit more parliamentary theater, so it'd be okay.
Parliamentary theater. That's a new one.
This is Tom too again. Mike, as I've said before, my concern about voting has a lot less to do with what we as what recommendations and advice we give to the county and votes that are taken with respect to those things. Because, Sarah's made it very clear that it's the discussion and the arguments that the commissioners will look at. But I do think voting matters. It matters some of the time. And one of the places I think it matters is in the election of officers and subcommittee members, simply because they have some power to control the agenda of what the organization does. So you've just given me some comfort. I mean, if when we vote for officers, you have to put in an address that is the baseline for your membership. That is what we did last, I guess, June. that makes me feel better.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Do we have another one? It looks like
There's a
Susan.
written comment. Bill Bush writes in the chat, unless you have a very sophisticated tracking system, voting online will be on the honor system.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and Liz, do you want to read Liz's comment?
Yes, let me see. Liz Vitale writes in the chat, I just want to make sure that it was clear my comment was not a criticism of the bylaws committee. You're doing an amazing job and I'm grateful for all the time you're giving to our community. Let's see, I've got to scroll down here. Gosh, why is it not scrolling?
My comment was a response to the individuals who are suggesting new smaller NCAC boundaries that are a thinly veiled attempt at gerrymandering. Okay, we're going to move on. So I don't see anything else. Can we go to a poll on section 4? So can you stop? We're done with this section, right, Tom? There's no more slides, correct? Okay. So poll.
Actually, we have one more after this, but it's basically we've moved that out of this, so that's really moved. So.
Oh, you're okay. Okay. Okay, let's do poll 4. And thank you for all of your.
That's membership rights. I don't think that was the title. Membership establishment is, I believe, what we should be polling on. We decided not to vote on
The third one. Yeah.
Well,
oh, do you think I got
I'm
the
saying the
title wrong?
text
Yes,
says.
I think you're right. I think I should have edited that. Sorry. Should be membership establishment, right? Yeah, we've got 11. So it might be a little more confusing. So basically, question 1 is about whether you'd like to have that registration done annually, or we haven't specified how often, but have a registration list of members. Yep, 21. And thank you for Helena. And we're waiting on 9. Well, actually, 5 of us are not. So are people about done? Do you want me to give you a little more time? Anyone object if I stop the poll? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Share. And details. So what we have is, do you support the new wording for membership establishment? Yes is 12 out of 21 or 57%. No is 5 out of 21 or 24%. Unsure or I have a question or comment is 4 out of 21 for 19%. And no one asked any questions. So sounds like it was just a little tougher one. So thank you. That's helpful information.
To me, that says we need to work a little bit more on justification to be able to convince people that's necessary or show people that it's not.
Right. And then, but it does sound like people see a value. It was nearly 60% felt like it would be valuable. So,
yeah.
But we'll think more on that. So thank you guys very much for that. I'm just going to go directly into the meeting evaluation poll. now and launch it. So I really appreciate you guys hanging in for all this and all your participation. I have a last poll here. Stop sharing. Back. Poll. Watch. This has several questions. So please take your time, but they're quick questions.
And once again, we're not allowed to vote.
We are not voting. No, we are not. But this will help us a lot for our future sessions.
That we, the subcommittee, I should have said.
Yes. This is our second one. I think I'm hoping we made some improvements from our first one, and we're just really want to make sure that we're representing you guys and you feel heard. Got 21 out of 28. I think it should be it because the rest are committee members. Anyone object if I stop the poll? Okay. I can't get to detail for some reason. So for pace of the meeting, one person said too slow. No one said too rushed. About right, 21 out of 22, 95%. The recommendations after discussion are satisfactory, 11 out of 19 or 58%. Of concern to me, 4 out of 21%. Unsure, I want to think about it, 4 out of 19 or 21%. The meeting was multiple choice, welcoming and friendly, 19 out of 20. Contentious, 0. That's good. I felt free to express my views, that they were heard by the committee, 8 out of 20 or 40%. I felt unheard by the committee, 0. Well worth my time, 7 out of 20 or 35%. Too long, 3 out of 20 or 15%. And 4, I have the following questions or comments about the proposal. View details. That's where the details are. Okay. Randall Cox said, these sessions are valuable and helpful for us to get a better grip of the decisions to be made. Thank you. Thank you, Randall. And I have the following suggestions for upcoming feedback sessions. There weren't any. And then qualifications for membership, 10 out of 13 were resident, were 77%, 11 out of 13 were property owners, or 85%. Holder of a beneficial interest in real property is 1. So, and no business owners. All right. Thank you very, very much. I'm going to go back to Zoom here. Now, I want to thank Tom, Sipe, and Wyatt for an incredible amount job on this. They have spent hours, countless. I don't usually use the word countless, but really truly countless, and to the committee for all of all of your work. And to Sarah, who just said she had to run. Oh, and the poll went away after he did question 3. Okay, thank you, Tom Prohodich. Thank you all. You have our email address, and please feel free to reach out anytime with follow-ups. We really appreciate everything. I'm going to end the meeting now at 4:22, and we hope to see you on Wednesday night for Article 4, which is officers. It's also got a lot of information, and on Saturday for Article 5, which is meetings. And our next bylaws committee meeting is actually Friday morning at 9:30 for a rousing discussion of follow-up from these different feedback sessions. So thank you again for coming, and we hope to see you again at future ones. Thanks so much. I'm going to end the meeting. Take care. Bye-bye.